At Bay Market Cafe, we know life can get in the way of good food, so we're here to offer a hand. Online ordering is back, and this time, it's better than ever. If you overslept and are running out of time, order online and pick it up. Raining? Get it delivered. On your way to go there or do that, order and pick it up. Sun scorching? Meeting? Get it delivered. That way, you can spend more time doing this or that with him, her, they, and them. So whether you need your morning coffee, you're craving a red velvet donut, ramen, a lamb burger, or a falafel pita, order the food you love and skip the line. Pick it up or have it delivered. That's Bay Market Online.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the 17th of 19 candidate forums for the 2021 general elections in the Cayman Islands, being hosted by the Chamber of Commerce in association with Foster's. My name is Mike Gibbs, and I have the honor of being the current president of the Chamber of Commerce. I will also be one of the panelists asking the questions this evening, along with Mr. Nelson Dilbert, vice president of the Chamber. I'd like to begin my opening comments by welcoming Georgetown South candidates Barbara Connolly and Alric Lindsay, and thanking them for accepting the Chamber's invitation to participate in this forum. Your willingness to appear on this platform demonstrates to voters that you take the democratic process seriously and are ready to respond to a series of questions on the top issues as identified by a recent online Chamber survey. More than 400 responses and more than 200 questions have been submitted via the survey, and these will help to frame the questions for this evening's forum. There is certainly not enough time to ask all the questions, but we will do our best to cover the topics that have been identified as the most important to the Cayman Islands and the Georgetown South constituency. When the Chamber was established in 1965, the goal was to create an organization that supports, promotes, and protects the interests and welfare of its members and the wider community. Being nonpartisan, we have hosted forums every election year since the 1988 election. So for 9 elections, we have provided members of the community with an opportunity to hear from their candidates and educate themselves before Election Day. These forums have taken weeks of planning and preparation, with all the credit going to the hardworking Chamber staff, but would not have been possible without the financial support of our sponsors: Foster's, Affinity Recruitment, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART. So a very big thank you to them. I would also like to extend a wholehearted thanks to our media partners, Cayman Mile Road, Cayman Life TV, Radio Cayman, Government Information Services, and ICCI FM for agreeing to broadcast tonight's forum. It is the first time that we have live streamed these forums on the internet, and we hope that this new format will enable even more people to watch them in the comfort of their home. It is now time to begin this evening's forum. I will therefore turn the proceedings over to Mr. Will Pinot, CEO of the Chamber, who will serve as this evening's moderator. He will explain the rules of the forum and introduce the Georgetown South candidates.
Good evening, candidates. The rules for tonight's forum are as follows. Each candidate will be asked a series of questions, and you have 2 minutes to answer if you choose to do so. Each candidate will be allowed to answer the question without interruption and is free to differ with an opinion or position of another candidate during your allotted response time. The candidate should deal solely with the issues, and at the conclusion of the forum, each candidate will be allowed a 2.5 minutes to deliver a closing statement. Now I'd like to introduce this evening's candidates. We'll begin with Mr. Alric Lindsay. Mr. Lindsay is a Caymanian who has lived in Georgetown for over 40 years. Over the years, he has been grateful for the opportunities to work with others in the community, including the People for the Protection of Smith-Bacadere, the Cayman Food Bank, volunteering for Cruzport Referendum Cayman, serving as a member of the Conditional Release Parole Board, and volunteer activities with Meals on Wheels program. Mr. Lindsay is also a past member of the Rotary Club of the Cayman Islands, during which time he acted as an advisor to high school students in the Junior Achievement Program. As a professional, Mr. Lindsay initially qualified as a certified public accountant and subsequently qualified as an attorney at law. He is also an accredited director with the Governance Institute of Canada. Good evening. Mrs. Barbara Conley, seeking re-election in the constituency of Georgetown South, was born in Georgetown and has lived in that district all of her life. She has 2 children and 2 grandchildren. Mrs. Conley was the Parliamentary Secretary for the Ministry of Education and Youth and Finance and Economic Development, and also the Deputy Speaker of the House of Parliament. She also acted as Speaker occasionally. She acted as temporary minister periodically for both ministers, Honorable Juliana O'Connor Conley and the Honorable Roy McTaggart. Mrs. Conley was also a member of the Public Accounts Committee, a member of the Oversight Committee of the Office of Ombudsman, and the chairperson of the Organizing Committee of the Youth Parliament. Having spent the last 4 years working at a grassroots level for her constituency, she wants to continue her work on the ground, making improvement to the lives of those around her. She is not the sort of person to come up with ideas and then delegate to others to carry out. She is much more interested in showing by example. Welcome, candidates. And at this time, we're going to take a short commercial break. And when we return, President Mike Gibbs will begin the first round of questioning. Please stay tuned.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for Georgetown South. I'll now turn over to Mr. Mike Gibbs for the first round of questions.
Thank you, Will, and good evening once again, candidates. Appreciate you being here. The first question, which I will address to Mr. Lindsay, and then Ms. Connolly will follow with her answer, is in respect of qualifications. Why have you decided to run for elected office, and what makes you the candidate of choice for the voters of Georgetown South?
I think it all started when I was young and seeing politicians come through the neighborhood, make promises, and then years later when I went to university and started to learn more about law and regulations and contracts, I began to see how important it was to enforce or not enforce things. And over the years, I've seen many politicians not execute the promises. And after some time, I decided I would like to be that person who is in a policy-making position so that I can execute actions in the best interests of the public, rather than repeating the same set of circumstances every 4 years. I want to be that person that resolves items and then brings new ideas to the community and to the Cayman Islands. I feel I'm qualified to be a great candidate for Georgetown South, not just based on my academic qualifications and professional experience, but also based on the fact that I care about the whole of the Cayman Islands, and everything that I will do will be in the best interest of the Cayman Islands and not in my personal interest.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, same question, please.
Thank you for the question, Mike. The reason why I decided to throw my hat in a ring again this time around is I have spent my working life in the private sector and mainly in financial services, including at a senior level. And I understand it takes what it takes to make an economy like Cayman work. I've also been involved for over 20 years at the grassroots party level, assisting a cross-section of our people However, I could. At the last election, when my country asked me to run, and my country and my party needed me to step up to and run, I did. The good people of Georgetown South chose me, and I went to work for them. I've spent the last 4 years working as hard as I ever have, perhaps harder, to make my people's lives better. But I also work directly with two important ministries, education and finance. And this gave me a breadth of experience in how to get things done inside government. I've also sat in cabinet as a temporary minister. And I've had the honor of serving as the acting Speaker of the House of Parliament. In summary, I have the experience, a proven track record, and I have ably served Georgetown South for 4 years. I know many people in Georgetown South personally, and they know me. They know I am there in the good times and the bad, including during COVID. I have the work ethic, the empathy, the compassion, and I am a solutions-oriented person. For all of these reasons, I am the best candidate for this job.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Connolly, we're going to start with you. This question is going to be on constituency projects. If elected, what 2 or 3 projects or programs would you like to accomplish for the people of Georgetown South?
Crime is one of them. I'd like to continue setting up neighborhood crime programs, which has proven very effective in curtailing crime in my constituency. In addition to the program, WhatsApp chats are set up to include the beat officer, so if a suspicious activity is reported on the chat, everyone is kept abreast and can remain vigilant. I'd like to also continue care and assistance for our most vulnerable. One of my passions in this job is caring for my seniors, and they have quite separate needs from the rest of the community. I will advocate for them to be given priority when they visit any government department, to include public and private hospitals, supermarkets, NAU, banks, etc. Another project I want to continue with is the youth programs. I want to advocate for more after-school programs for the youth, such as football, basketball, and homework clubs. If elected, I would like to provide free Wi-Fi, as I have done at Smith Barcadere and the South Sound Community Centre at the park in Windsor Park for the youth, as this was installed there some years ago, and I have received representation by the youth for this service to be installed there again. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question.
In terms of projects for Georgetown South, the different parts of Georgetown South are in different economic situations, and that sometimes impacts what they require. So when you look at South Sound, one of the major things I'd like to see is less of this race for overdevelopment, which is impacting the ability to have a good biodiversity situation. I think development is moving too quickly, and the environment is not being considered as a part of that process. And I think as a result of the fast-paced development, we are going to see more traffic in South Sound, and South Sounders are complaining about that at the moment. So I would like to work towards a solution for traffic within South Sound, and also ensure that a development plan is updated so that we can see how South Sound is going to look in the long term, and we can provide for, proper road structures and proper protection for the environment. When you go through the rest of Georgetown South and you get to places like Windsor Park, I would like to see some of the community activities come back to Windsor Park, including activities for seniors, including senior programs regarding technology, get them up to speed with Facebook and social media so they can keep in touch with what's happening in Cayman. Also, I'd love to see a learning center in Windsor Park. We used to use a church in Windsor Park for after-school programs, and that has fallen off for whatever reason. I'd like to see a learning center so that kids can have a safe place to go and learn. And my overall goal is to actually lift the whole of Georgetown South. And that includes what I just mentioned about the environment and also education for our children.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, staying with you for the next question, shifting from constituency projects to more national priorities. There are several national issues facing our three islands. Please identify one or two issues that you wish to champion when elected.
I think in terms of the top national issues to champion, there's so many issues that need to be discussed. You know, my top issue, you know, is the environment, but I also, you know, have a leaning towards education. Since there's so many issues to discuss, I'll just go through human capital. Coming out of the lockdown and going into this post-COVID recovery period, human capital is going to be critical. We need to get our Caymanians back to work. We need to put Caymanians first. Part of this process is going to involve amendments to the immigration regulations, in particular Reg 6, which talks about may have a training program for Caymanians. That needs to be changed to shall have a training program for Caymanians. I think coming out of going into the post-COVID recovery period as well, we need to appreciate that a lot of Caymanians are out of work, a lot of tour operators are out of work. And in that area, I think we need to make some adjustments. For example, the wildlife interaction zones, for example, Stingray City. I think we need to restrict those licenses to Caymanians and other persons who currently have those licenses. But going forward in the next 36 months or so, we have to grandfather the existing license holders. And then going forward, only Caymanians can get wildlife interaction zone licenses. We have to protect the entrepreneurs that are Caymanians. Also, what I want to see going forward is no foreign cruise ship CEO or related company owning any part of any tour operator in Cayman. I would like to also see an expansion of our vocational education bases so that our children are prepared to go into various vocational areas, and our adults who are in other industries can move into those other industries.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, the same question, please.
There are so many important issues. I cannot choose just one to mention. Rebuilding our tourism industry will be hugely important. I do not expect tourism will return exactly as we had been accustomed to, but I'm happy that Moses Kirkconnell has decided to run again so that he can do his part in shaping that rebuilding. We must regain our stayover tourism business and also seek to further diversify our offerings. That is why I'm so happy to see the expansion of our health tourism sector with the addition of 2 proposed large hospitals to serve local as well as international markets. Education is also a very important issue, and I will continue to advocate for further improvements in standards of education with greater emphasis on the reform of early years education. With the rollout of the updated curriculum and the completion of the new John Gray High School complex, the plans to give more authority to schools and parents and developing a new strategy for children under 5, those are key to the performance of our public school students. Infrastructure, health, and environment are all important, and so we must complete the waste-to-energy plant, the mental health facility, the road build-out, and implement a proper national public transportation system. We must look again at the provision of our health insurance and pension systems and to make them more fit for purpose. And we need to look at housing cost, both in the rental market and home ownership.
Thank you.
Staying with you, Ms. Connolly, going to go into education. What do you see as being the biggest hindrance to the education system in the Cayman Islands, and how would you specifically propose to address it?
Education is very dear to my heart. As a member of the Education Council, we have been working on the establishment of new governing bodies for public schools. And at the direction of the Minister, the Education Council has developed a plan for a pilot and subsequent rollout of governing bodies. But COVID has delayed its implementation. So if I have the honor of being re-elected, I intend to continue this work with the Education Council and to do my utmost best to ensure that the pilot program is as successful as I believe that it will be, that all schools will eventually have its own governing body that works with the Ministry of Education and the Department of Education. Another suggestion would be smaller class sizes. I think that's an issue in terms of why our children, some of our children are falling through the gaps. So students who are demonstrating difficulties, learning difficulties, are having really a hard time. So we need to give attention to that, pay attention to that, and try to assist them in providing smaller classroom environments for that sector of children. Organizing more after-school school tutoring for public school students is also what I would advocate for. Using teachers and volunteers to give private lessons to those students that may require that extra attention.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question.
I have done a lot of research, and the favorite person I've researched is John Hattie. And John Hattie focuses on what is effective on learning. So we see a lot of politicians over the years focusing on what Hattie calls the politics of distraction. Distractions are things that are not effective on learning, but which politicians pursue to their death. This includes building more buildings, bigger buildings, constantly changing the curriculum. It's proven that bigger buildings don't have that great impact on learning itself, as we can see from $100 million building built in Frank Sound, and now $160 million being spent on John Gray, with continuing failures in the public education system. So those are distractions that we can't continue to focus on. The things that we have to focus on are recruitment of the best teachers and recruitment far in advance. We need to focus on getting feedback from all of the stakeholders in the process. So these are teachers, school principals, all of the other adults in the school system, parents, students, and policymakers. All of the views of the policymakers must be taken into account if you're going to get to a point where you can properly diagnose, intervene, and evaluate on an ongoing basis to make sure that the methods you're employing are effective on learning. I also think that we need to increase the mental health support that parents and students need. As we know, there are a lot of broken homes in the Cayman Islands, and on the parole board, I've seen one parent in prison and one parent outside prison, and then the child suffers. So I think we need to provide more mental health support for the social and mental well-being of parents and teachers in order for that child to have a chance and in order for him to have success in his learning.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, staying with you for the fifth question and the last question in the first section before we take a quick break, focuses on to the future of Smith Barcadere. And this is one of the questions that came in through the survey. The plans to redevelop Smith Barcadere were abandoned a year ago this month as a result of community protest. What is your view about the future of this site?
I think that the residents were right to raise their concerns regarding the proposed redevelopment. I became aware of the project that was published on the Cayman Bonfire website in December 2019. Not many people were aware of this. People became aware when there was a newspaper article in January talking about the submission of bids and a deadline approaching. We want to maintain the natural state of Smith Barcadere. If we change it or redevelop it, then we're not going to be sharing the same memories of Smith Barcadere that we have with our children. I think that the changes that we could do, we need to push back some of those boulders from the side of the road so that it would create space for the handicap to park. And we should also have a mobi mat there so that the handicap can be able to use and enjoy the beach. Going forward, though, the way things are done have to change in terms of, I did a Freedom of Information request, and we discovered there were no minutes kept for Smith Barcadere. There's no record of the establishment of a valid committee for Smith Barcadere. We were also told that $250,000 was going to be spent coming from the government and $250,000 was going to be raised within the community. When I did Freedom of Information requests, we discovered that $1 million was budgeted for 2020 and $1 million was budgeted for 2021. So things don't really line up. And going forward, I think if anything's going to happen, we need to have more transparency in projects like this. I say leave Smith Barcadere alone, leave it in its natural state, and push back those boulders, create more space for parking for the handicap, and put down the mobi mat.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, the same question, please.
Thank you for the question. When I first was elected, Smith Barcadere, I would walk by there in the mornings. I walk in the mornings for exercise. And I would look at the actual property that government acquired. And basically, it was just a wilderness. And this is actually not Smith, not the actual cove. It's the other land that government acquired. And I thought, why don't we try to enhance that for our people? And why not? Why not provide something, a better environment, a better place for for families, for children to go and enjoy? So I approached my cabinet, my ministers and premier, and I said, can we just do something with Smith Barcadere? And he said, I had the support of the cabinet to say, or the caucus to say, yes, let's do something with it. Now, we started with the underbrushing of the land there. And that was something, there was no money that came out of the government coffers for that. That was all volunteer. I used the prisoners to go in there to assist with that. I used Mr. Alti, his gardener, and my brother. Shirley was also a part of that cleanup committee to actually just do the underbrush. And we just all did all the pruning of the trees so that you could actually see the sea from the road. And it's a beautiful environment just now. And then, so when Public Works, we went to the Public Works to actually get to do a plan. And it was the plan was very simple at the time. And then for some reason, there was some other issues that we just kept enhancing it. But I just want the public to know today that I don't know where those figures came from. $1 million, $2 million, that was never discussed. And the fact of the matter is, we thought perhaps about $250,000. That's what the discussion was. And we were actually going to go out there to the private sector and do a private, public-private sector partnership in terms of enhancing that development.
Thank you. Thank the candidates. We've gone through the first 5 questions. So after the break, we'll be right back with the second round of questions. Please stay tuned.
Feed the family for less with Foster's Pick 5.
Choose from a range of meats including chicken thighs, pork chops, ground meats, beef stir-fry, sirloin steaks, and more, and only pay $19.99 for any 5-packs.
The meat is always fresh and never previously frozen. It's the perfect way to stock up for the week. That's dinner sorted.
Look out for Pick 5 in the meat department at all Foster's supermarket locations.
Foster's, better value because we care.
Here in the Cayman Islands, the private sector is the prosperity engine that drives the country forward. Just like a real engine. The better we understand how it works, the better we can make it run, and the better off we'll be. To help illustrate how our economy works, let's take a step back in time to when there were only a few thousand people living in Cayman. In those days, most people survived by fishing or farming for food. It was a simple, wholesome life. But it was a lot of hard work. Most people bought what they needed from their neighbors. As people bought and sold things, their individual wealth went up or down. But the overall wealth of the country stayed the same. In a simple economy like this, the only way one person could increase their wealth was by reducing someone else's. In order to increase the overall wealth of the country, one of our Caymanian ancestors would have to sell something, a product or service, to someone somewhere else, and bring that money back home. In other words, we would have to export something. In those days, our biggest export was labor. Men worked overseas or on the seas and brought the money home, thereby increasing the total wealth of the country. Although the economy is much bigger and more complex today, these same principles still apply. Every time a company in Cayman sells a product or service to a customer overseas, the overall wealth of the country increases. Once it's here, it flows around the local economy between the government, the people, and the companies and becomes a part of our society's wealth. The 2 biggest sources of income for our economy today are financial services and tourism, often called the pillars of our economy. Tourists come here and spend their money. So all of the tourism companies like hotels, restaurants, buses, Stingray City Tours that make sure our visitors have a great time are helping to increase the wealth of our country. Just like tourists, clients of financial services firms come here and spend money too. So all of our financial service companies like insurance companies, fund administrators, lawyers, and accountants that facilitate investment transactions for people and companies around the world bring money into the economy and increase the overall wealth. The point is, if we want to increase the prosperity of our country, the best way to do that, in fact, the only way to do that, is to grow the private sector. In particular, the companies at the front lines that bring the wealth here from overseas in the first place. In the next video, we'll talk a little about how money moves around the economy. For now, thanks for watching, and remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine. In the last episode, we learned about the important role of companies here in Cayman that do business with overseas customers and generate new wealth for the Cayman Islands economy. But what about all the other companies in the Cayman Islands? How do they fit into our prosperity engine? Every business in the Cayman Islands falls into one of 3 groups, or tiers. Each tier plays a critical role in our economy. The first tier is made up of all the companies that do business with overseas customers and bring money into our economy. Companies in this tier are like the gas tank of our economic prosperity engine. The more we have in the tank, the farther we can go. Although most well-known companies in this tier are in financial services like Butterfield Bank or tourism like the Ritz-Carlton, there are many other well-known Tier 1 companies doing business with overseas customers like Uniregistry, Health City, and all of the companies in Cayman Enterprise City. The second tier of the economy is all the companies that do business with other local companies, like IT and marketing consultants, or companies that sell supplies to bars and restaurants. These companies are also very important because without them, the companies they supply would need to buy their goods and services from overseas. So while companies in Tier 1 bring money into our economy, companies in Tier 2 help keep it here. The third tier is made up of all the companies that provide services to people that live and work in the Cayman Islands. Companies in this tier include supermarkets, dry cleaners, mechanics, gyms, doctors, dentists, architects, house builders, florists, and gardeners. These companies are important sources of employment and business opportunities for our people. And they play a really important role because without them, Cayman wouldn't be a very nice place to live. So to recap, Tier 1 companies do business with customers overseas. Tier 2 companies do business with other companies in Cayman. And Tier 3 companies do business with those who live here. Every company and self-employed contractor in the Cayman Islands falls into one of these three tiers, and they all play an important role in making our nation prosperous, helping bring money into our country, improve our economy, and creating jobs. And without them, the Cayman Islands wouldn't be the great country that it is. Thanks for watching, and remember to share this on social media so we can all help fuel the economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forums for Georgetown South. I'll turn it over to Nelson Dilbert to begin the second round of questions.
Thank you, Will. Good evening again to the candidates. Thank you for coming out and joining us this evening. We're going to start with Ms. Connolly this evening for the second round of questioning. We're going to start the conversation off with affordable housing. Do you believe that there is adequate affordable housing in Georgetown South? If not, what ideas, plans would you seek to introduce to assist the constituency?
Thank you, Nelson. I just want to return to the question about Smith Barcadair earlier. Just to say that if I'm re-elected, I will not return to Smith Barcadair to enhance that in any way unless I have a clear mandate from the people of the Cayman Islands, not just Georgetown South, but of the Cayman Islands, because all of those beaches are all public beaches. So I just want to be clear that it's from everyone. I have to have a clear mandate on that. In terms of the accessibility, I have received representation from some of the disabled people that are not able to access that beach as a result of no proper wheelchair facilities. The bathrooms aren't equipped for the handicap. So we do have a legal obligation to provide some sort of access for those people. On to the question about housing. What was the question again?
Do you believe that there is adequate housing in Georgetown South? And if not, do you have any ideas to help them?
Housing is also an issue that's near and dear to my heart because I find we are building apartments, condominiums, and we are not really catering to the lower and middle class, lower and middle class people. So the plan, if we are re-elected, me and my government, is to appoint a parliamentary secretary to assist the minister responsible for housing to ensure that there's a sustained focus on new and innovative affordable housing initiatives and to promote the available programs. I want to develop more affordable home rentals and home ownership schemes alongside that of the NHDT.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question.
First, I would like to clarify where the numbers came from, the $1 million for 2020 and the $1 million for 2021 for the Smith Barcadair redevelopment project. that came from the Ministry of Planning, and it is in writing, is in response to a Freedom of Information request. And I will provide that to the incumbent by email so that she has a copy. In terms of affordable housing, one of the things is some people just can't pay that deposit when it comes to buying a house. And one of the ideas that I have is to just have that deposit waived, because that is the only thing sometimes that's preventing someone from getting home ownership. They can make the payments, but they just can't get a deposit done. One thing we see overseas is high-rise complexes. It's an idea, but it's not an idea that I like, because when we look overseas, these high-rise complexes are referred to as ghettos and projects. What I would like to see is a real community. So not just your typical Frank Hall type home, but real communities where there's a learning center, where people can actually improve their skills, trade, library, communal gardening, so that it is a place where people get lifted, and you don't return home to a ghetto. You return home to a place which increases your social and mental well-being. One of the other ideas is container homes. My friend just moved into a container home. The only issue with that is, how is it going to fit in with the zoning of the relevant area, and whether or not it's going to change or affect the market value of the homes in that area. So container homes is also a good idea, but we have to look at what the long-term development plan is for all these communities in order for that idea to fit in.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, staying with you for the next question, focusing now on traffic. South Sound Road receives a high volume of traffic, with much of it coming from and to the eastern districts. The road is narrow and unsafe for pedestrians and cyclists in several locations, with several people being knocked down and seriously injured. What would you propose to improve conditions along this roadway?
So first of all, the overall issue that we have with traffic is complicated by the lack of a development plan. So we had a development plan dated 1977. That was updated to 1997. It's meant to be updated every 5 years. So 1997 to 2021, it's a long time. It's a little bit more than 5 years. So what we have is an out-of-control development that is not taking into account the impacts. One of those impacts is traffic. If you look at all the developments planned along South Sound Road now, and there are several, including by Hurley's roundabout, all that was done without properly thinking about the impact on South Sound. What's going to happen now is a lot of traffic is going to be unloaded onto South Sound Road, and the traffic problem is going to get worse rather than better. Now, there are a lot of solutions for traffic in Cayman as a whole. Obviously, we encourage carpooling, encourage people who live or who work close together to just carpool. I know that's not really our culture, but we have to try. We have to really improve the public transport system overall, but it has to be reliable 24 hours. I also see other methods in other countries, like water taxis, for example, where people go from the coast to the town area. But whatever method that's used, you do have to have an excellent public transport system for it to work. But that's an overall picture of traffic in the Cayman Islands that it affects in all areas. But the major thing that's going to hit South Sound is if that pace of development continues without a proper updated development plan, South Sound is going to be in pain for a long time.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, same question, please.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to return to the housing issue. Mr. Lindsay stated that the deposit on, or people can't afford the deposit on home, on their home or apartment. But I just want to state that for first-time owners, the government now waives the stamp duty for first-time owners up to $400,000. And if we are re-elected, we plan to increase that to $500,000. That's in our manifesto. So in that case, I think that would assist our first-time homeowners in purchasing a home. With regard to traffic, I know that's the one complaint I get from my South Sound people is traffic, the traffic issue there. And I know we continue to build roads, and that really is not the answer. I think we really have to look at a proper, modern, national public transportation system. That is absolutely mandatory in order for us to avoid all of this traffic. I mean, it's just no way. Just shipping more cars into the island is just not the answer. So another option that Mr. Lindsay referred to, and I agree with, is some sort of option for boats to actually provide transportation. Say, for instance, from Northside, they can take the boat across then to Cayman Bay or somewhere in that the West Bay area then. I think that's another option for us. But in terms, we also need to look at busing for all our schools, whether it's public or private, and as well as to encourage car sharing or carpooling, and also working from home because and staggering work hours, because that we actually were able to experience that over COVID, and that seemed to really have worked for us. So I think those are options that we really need to look into.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Connolly, just staying with you, the next topic is going to be on employment. What is your view about work and the current priority of employing Caymanians? Would you propose any changes to the current system? If yes, what would you recommend?
Work whose main function is the employment of Caymanians is a good concept, but it's still new, and we need to give it a chance. However, I would not be satisfied with the performance of any agency tasked with ensuring Caymanians' employment until the majority of our people are employed. This is one of the areas that I have grappled with in my constituency over the past 4 years. Many of our students that are leaving high school, are unable to find jobs. And some of these, even with degrees, are finding it difficult to find a job. This line of you have to have a certain amount of experience, well, I ask the question, how do you get experience if you're not given the opportunity to work? Surely it is up to the business sector to provide a qualified Caymanian with an opportunity, not only for the experience, but also to advance in that job. So I appeal to the Chamber and its members to please endeavour to hire and train our Caymanians. Give them a chance to prove themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question.
I experimented with work to see how the website would work. And I was totally confused because the site didn't explain where you were to sign up. I discovered after reading the whole site that you had to go and create another account somewhere else, and then you could use the site. So I think in terms of user friendliness, I think that could improve. I've also heard from employers that they've put up jobs, but no Caymanians have applied. So I think there's something within the system that needs to be looked at, and relevant parties should look at it. Now, when we look at unemployment in Cayman, we see that from the Economics and Statistics website, which is eso.ky, we see unemployment rate rising for Caymanians from 4.6 to 5.6% from 2018 to 2019. So we get a general idea that the unemployment situation for Caymanians is not really getting better. And then when you look at what happened during the lockdown, a lot of Caymanians out of work, a lot of Caymanians getting 2 days out of the week for their work. And it seems like we are not a priority in general, because I hear other people are coming back from other countries on work permits and they're being provided with full-time jobs. So I think the real issue is whether or not the government is actually doing its job. The immigration law, for example, should be amended to ensure that Caymanians are first. So not just by marketing and promises, but legal obligations that require Caymanians to be put first. And I think that we need to start linking what we're doing in the schools to the sectors. Whatever demand we have in certain sectors should be linked to what we're actually doing in the schools, so we produce students who are ready to work.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, staying with you for question number 9, focuses on a very hot topic of the legalization of cannabis. What is your view on the legalization of cannabis for recreational use? Is this something you would support? Why or why not?
I think this has to be done in 2 steps. Having sat on the parole board and seen various issues that impacts on families, also seeing that young men in Cayman don't seem to have a second chance. They have this on their record for life. Not for life, but for such a long period of time that it prevents them from getting a job. And if you spend time with these young people, you realize that because they're so frustrated with the process, not being able to get a job with this thing on their record, they then go back into this cycle. So then they commit a crime, go back to prison, and then there's a single mom outside prison taking care of a child. And so the cycle is worsened. So for me, it's 2 steps. The first step is to decriminalize. So for personal consumption, I would say you would have a fine or a ticket. I think legalization is further down the line, because for me, education is critical. You have to educate the public on the pros and cons of using cannabis. Now, cannabis could be useful in terms of medical tourism. If you allow manufacture of cannabis in Cayman, then you could open the doors to a new revenue source. If we could export to countries that allow legal importation, if we bring people here to improve their medical well-being through the use of cannabis, everyone wins. The person has to go to the hospital, so the doctors win. They have to get in a taxi or rent a car, so the taxi or rental car company wins. They have to stay somewhere, so the hotel or Airbnb B&B wins. So looking at the medical tourism aspect as well, we can all win from this. We can also have this as an additional revenue source and hold some of this revenue on a reserve for emergencies and for topping up healthcare or pension.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, same question, please.
This is a tough one. Legalization of cannabis. I have varying views on this because some of our young people out there are using cannabis as a recreational use, for recreational use, and if they are prosecuted for that, they go to prison for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And like Mr. Lindsay said, then they get a police record, and then they can't get a job, and they can't. They have all of these things that are against them as a result of that. So I think, like he said, to decriminalizing cannabis, I would support over legislating it. But I really think that that's something that we have to revisit as a government and as a country to determine the best way forward for our children, because unfortunately or fortunately, it's something that a lot of our young people are participating in, and we have to really think about their future and what is in it for them in terms of employment and other opportunities for them if we just continue to leave it the way it is.
Thank you.
All right. This is going to be question 10 and our last question for this section of the forum. It's going to touch on the revitalization of Georgetown. This is going to start with you, Ms. Connolly. What is your view of the current Georgetown revitalization project? If elected, would you continue with the project or would you take a different approach? If yes, please explain.
I certainly would, if I'm elected, I certainly would agree to continue with the Georgetown revitalization project. I think Georgetown is a ghost town just now, and we really need to revitalize it. We need to bring more life back into Georgetown, and whether it's providing the multi-story, the buildings that you have the residents upstairs and a business downstairs, or whether you just we just need the activity back in Georgetown, because a lot of the businesses are moving to Cayman Bay or outside of Georgetown, and we really, when I grew up, Georgetown was the in place. It was the place that we went to for entertainment on a Friday night. We just had, that was our meeting place in Georgetown. So my view on that is we have to continue to work on revitalizing Georgetown, and also to provide some green areas there, and also with the park that we've just broke ground on over by the old tower building. That's also going to be a green space, and that's for the seamen. And I think that's a very good idea for our seamen to have that erected there for their enjoyment, as well as for everyone on the whole.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question, please.
I think that revitalization certainly sounds good, and it's something we've been talking about for years. However, I think that we're going in the wrong direction, because if we don't update the 1997 development plan, and if we don't think about how we want Cayman to look in 20 years and 50 years, then we don't know how this revitalization is going to fit into our long-term plans. So I say plan first, plan long-term first. Let's decide as a people how we want Georgetown Harbor to look, how we want downtown to look. Let's decide that first, make a long-term plan. Then we can think about how new entertainment fits into Georgetown, downtown. How activities like having a total pedestrianized street on the weekends, for example, having local food, having local music. One of the other issues I think needs to be taken care of before we beautify Georgetown is we hear about the wastewater that is escaping into the harbor, and I think we need a proper wastewater treatment technology and treatment. So there are many different ways to treat wastewater. So there's physical wastewater treatment, there's chemical treatment, there's biological wastewater treatment, and there is sludge treatment. So I think we need to get a proper treatment in place. You know, when you talk about physical water treatment, you're talking about sedimentation, you're talking about aeration, we talk about biological processes, we're talking about aerobic processes, anaerobic processes, and composting. So I think we need to get that right in order to make sure we are rebuilding in the correct and safe environment.
Thank you.
Well, thank candidates. We've gone through 2 rounds of questions, and now we're going to take another short commercial break. And when we return, we'll come back to the third round of questions, so please stay tuned.
At Bay Market Cafe, we know life can get in the way of good food, so we're here to offer a hand. Online ordering is back, and this time, it's better than ever. If you overslept and are running out of time, order online and pick it up. Raining? Get it delivered. On your way to go there or do that, order and pick it up. Sun scorching? Meeting? Get it delivered. That way, you can spend more time doing this or that with him, her, they, and them. So whether you need your morning coffee, you're craving a red velvet donut, ramen, a lamb burger, or a falafel pita, order the food you love and skip the line. Pick it up or have it delivered. That's Bay Market Online.
When companies do well, everyone does well. Not just the business owners, but the employees, other businesses, the government, and even the customers. Seriously, to learn how, let's look at how money flows through a company. When a company sells its goods and services, they receive money, which is called revenue. That money is then split up and used in a number of different ways. Some of the money goes to employees. To keep it simple, we'll call this salaries. Some of the money goes to pay for products and services the company needs to keep running. Those expenses are called overheads. Some of the revenue goes to the government in duties and fees. And finally, any money left over goes to the owners of the business as profit. So no matter what products or services a company provides, it's like a machine that takes in money as revenue and spits money out as salaries, overheads, government fees, and profits. It's really that simple. Every dollar that a company takes in gets turned into one of those four things. Okay, so how does it benefit everyone when companies do well? Let's take a closer look. First, with salaries. Salaries are important for the economy because most people get most of their income from their employment. Next, government fees. In the Cayman Islands, the vast majority of the government's revenue comes from duties and fees paid by businesses. That money goes to pay for important government services like education, emergency services, healthcare, and infrastructure. Then we have overheads. Quite simply, one company's overhead is just another company's revenue. When a hotel needs supplies, they buy them from local suppliers. Those suppliers turn that revenue into salaries, overheads, duties and fees, and if they're lucky, profit. Some people think that business owners make too much money, but the truth is, the average company only makes 7.5 cents in profit for every dollar in sales. And that's assuming they make a profit at all. The other 92.5 cents goes to pay for salaries for staff, overheads that become revenue of other companies, and duties and fees that pay for the government services we need. In order to become successful, most business owners have to work extremely hard and take a lot of risks. If it wasn't for the ability to make a profit, the owner wouldn't have started the business in the first place. And if nobody started any businesses, there would be no jobs for employees, which means no salaries, no overheads to support other businesses, and no money from government fees to pay for our government services. So yeah, when companies do well, everyone does well. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at why countries need economic growth. For now, thanks for watching. And remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for Georgetown South. Now reached the stage this evening. We're in the third round of questions. Turn it over to President Mike Gibbs to begin that round.
Thank you, Will. Mr. Lindsay, this question I first addressed to you. It's on the topic of health insurance and the costs associated therewith. Health insurance premiums continue to increase annually for many businesses, and especially for persons who reach retirement age. What improvements, if any, would you propose to make health insurance more affordable for businesses and retirees?
So, health insurance cost for me has more to do with the structure of the industry rather than just being one of the items for cost of living. When I spoke to various professionals, it became apparent that there are certain gaps within the healthcare system that is contributing to the high cost. For example, there are surveys that are sent to doctors, but the completion of a survey is voluntary. The purpose of the survey is to get the maximum fee that is charged for each category. However, what's happening is that because the survey is voluntary, we don't really have a clear picture of what health insurance costs should be in the Cayman Islands. I think one of the solutions for me is to not just have the health insurance company get inspected by SEMA or undergo an audit, but also to get the doctors to undergo an audit, which is split into two areas. One area is safety, to make sure they're complying with safety standards, and the other area is financial, to ensure that we can look at any billing irregularities, any fraudulent invoices, checking on a sample basis whether or not their clients have been overcharged for procedures, giving clients, suggesting procedures to clients that they don't need, and in turn, the doctor then charging the maximum he can charge to the health insurance company to recover, and then also charging the patient. So I think a proper audit of the doctor's practices will help us to control the methods that they're using, whether or not they are proper and appropriate when it comes to billing. I think that's going to be a big contributing factor to reducing the healthcare costs.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, same question, please.
Yes, health insurance, and the issue I have with health insurance is for the elderly, because generally when we need insurance, health insurance, is when we're retiring, as opposed to when we're starting a job. So basically, that is when our people really need health insurance. And a lot of us, after we are retired, our employers, our former employers, do not cover us anymore. This is cut off, and we end up having to go to Cineco. And with that very basic plan from Cineco, it's just not covering anything for our seniors. And I really propose that, and it's also costing, and if the seniors actually go and get another plan from the private insurance provider, then it's quite a tremendous amount of money. So they just can't afford it. So they have to revert back to Cineco. So I think if I'm elected and the government that I'm involved in is elected, we have to really explore other options in terms of decreasing the insurance, health insurance, that's actually affecting more our seniors as opposed to others in the business place. And we actually have to have real strong discussions with our health insurance providers to determine whether they can assist with decreasing the rates particularly for our seniors, for anyone that's over 65, because that's really when they need the health insurance, and they just can't afford it.
Thank you.
Staying with you, Ms. Connolly, our next topic is going to be on youth matters. What do you regard as the top two issues facing our youth today, and how do you intend to address these concerns? The two topics or subjects that I think that are affecting our youth today are mental health and employment opportunities for our youth. Mental health challenges among our youth is becoming more and more prevalent, and we have to address this as a matter of urgency. Anxiety and depression is real among our youth, and even more so with the challenges that they have been confronted with over COVID. Depression is a common illness worldwide, with more than 300 million people affected. That is a staggering number.
So in discussions with some of my young constituents, mental health challenges were highlighted, and I was instrumental in having this included in our manifesto on page 9. We will be working closely with the Alex Panton Foundation to address young people's mental health. In terms of employment opportunities for youth, this is another area that is near and dear to my heart. If re-elected, the focus has to be on our youth and providing them with opportunities to enable them to compete in the workplace. We have to do more to open up technical and vocational opportunities for our young people, and our manifesto commits to the next Alliance government to the creation of a national skills strategy that will upskill and reskill our workforce. It is vital that the approach we take in schools dovetails with that strategy. The result will not just be in traditional trades such as construction and hospitality, but also the development of apprenticeships linked to the new innovation hubs in digital industries and health sciences.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question, please.
Through COVID, we saw so many issues affecting our youth. I remember going through West Bay and seeing families that couldn't connect to the internet because they didn't have Wi-Fi. And even if they had Wi-Fi, some of them didn't have the proper equipment. So we took on a task of raising money and spending some of our own money to get them laptops in various schools. So I think some of the issues have to do with a lack of long-term thinking to make sure that our students are properly equipped in the first place. I think that when it comes to employment, our youth are struggling with employment primarily, again, because of a lack of planning. And why I say this is that we should have had a vocational diploma a long time ago. We should have not just focused on financial services and had a traditional high school diploma. The traditional high school diploma does not accurately reflect the skills of our children. We have a vocational diploma where when that child graduates from high school, he has a skill or trade that he's graduating with, and then he can move on to an advanced trade school. We can have professionals come into the existing high school to teach those vocational programs. That is so that they can have the relevant practical experience and knowledge shared with them so that they are actually ready to work. I say this because some employers say that our Cayman students are not ready to work when they arrive in the workplace. This could significantly impact and change that. And the answer is not building bigger buildings or constantly changing the curriculum. It is actually doing the things that are effective.
Thank you.
Staying with you, Mr. Lindsay, for the next question, focuses on a ministerial position. So if elected, which ministry or position in the new government would best suit your skills and why?
I think the most logical position would be a parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Financial Services. I think once I learned that role, I think I could look forward to being a Minister of Financial Services. I would not want to jump into a role without having that background as a minister or as a government member. So I think my ambition is not to jump into a ministerial seat. However, if that is what the group of people that are elected want me to do, and if that is in the best interest of Georgetown South and the Cayman Islands, then I would entertain it. My background is in financial services. I, do keep abreast of all of the things that are impacting us, including our recent inclusion and the FATF gray list. And although we were taken off the OECD blacklist, we are in danger of falling under new criteria being developed by the EU Council that will place us on another blacklist. So I think if I am in the financial services ministry, having my experience and background, I'd be able to make suggestions such as getting members from the private sector to be involved in this process. So get senior members, senior lawyers, senior accountants to get seconded to the government. Then they can talk to the guys in Brussels. They have the practical experience. They have the know-how. They can make decisions that are in our best long-term interests. We also need to have partnerships with small member states in the EU and also other offshore jurisdictions that are being pressured by the blacklisting threat.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, same question, please.
I've actually worked, I was a councillor or parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Education and also in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. Both of those, I also acted as the temporary minister in those ministries. So I think I'm experienced that I could actually take on one of those positions. Possibly as a parliamentary secretary again, I'm not really sure. If the issue with me being a minister would take me away from, I see what the ministers and their responsibilities are and how they're not able to really service or assist their constituents the way they should. They're just so involved in their ministries. So I think it depends on what the government and indicates or suggests that I do if I'm re-elected and we form a government as to where I would be best suited. Community affairs would also be an interest for me because I'm also very passionate about my elderly. So, and I work a lot with my elderly, and even in my constituency, I'm on the ground with my elderly most every day. So I think that would also be an area that I would focus on. So that's kind of my skills in terms of community work and stuff would also allow me to be very comfortable in the Ministry of Community Affairs.
Thank you.
Staying with you again, Ms. Connolly. This one is going to be on constitutional reform. Would you support a constitutional provision which allows electors of a constituency to recall their elected member of parliament? Why or why not?
Just give me a minute.
Sure. We have
implemented the Standards in Public Life Act, and I would like to advocate that we provide a provision in that to include a code of conduct for parliamentarians. We're a small community and a small parliament, and therefore the ability to do any kind of recall needs to be carefully considered. What is of utmost importance is to have a stable parliament, and a recall of a member of parliament would indeed have to be carefully considered and advice sought on that issue.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question.
Yes, I would support a constitutional provision which allows electors from a constituency to recall an elected member of parliament. I believe there are two ways to do this. One is allowing the voters in the specific electoral district to do the vote. The issue with that is the person may be so popular in the electoral district that they may not remove him. So the other way I suggest is that you have all voters participate in the recall vote. Why do I suggest this? Because the actions of the minister could impact the entire Cayman Islands, the reputation and the stability of the Cayman Islands. In relation to the Standards and Public Life Act, the issue with that is in 2014, it contained wording that said a breach of the principles shall be contempt of Parliament. 2016, a change was made to say a breach of Parliament may be contempt of Parliament. So it shows a pattern of not taking accountability seriously. By changing wording from shall to may is clearly running away from accountability. One of the other things I think we need to do is have a written code of conduct. At the moment, what we're doing is relying on the UK House of Commons code of conduct where we don't have one. We need to also amend the Constitution to have different disqualification provisions so that we can list more circumstances where a person cannot run for office, including in this case a violent assault.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, for the last question in the third round, staying with you, focusing on the elderly, is would you recommend or support additional programs to assist the elderly population in the Cayman Islands in general? If yes, please elaborate.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the people that have worked so hard and, sweat and tears should not have to have sweat and tears in their old age. When I've traveled, I've seen the elderly treated with a lot more respect than I've seen in the Cayman Islands. When you're in a line in another country, the elderly and the pregnant go first in the line. Perhaps that's probably cultural in other countries, but it's a place that I think we need to go. Every establishment here, there should not be an elderly person that has to wait in a line. They should be at the front of the line. I think in connection with my ideas to have additional revenue sources, we need to have those revenue sources used to create reserves so that we can top up pension for elderly. And so we can also top up the health care for our elderly. We need to also do things that we see in other countries like the US, where you see the elderly people hosting at Walmart or other big superstores. We need to make sure that our elderly can continue to work after they retire, because some people do want to work. They do want to make the extra income. I think also we need to make sure elderly have technical training to keep up with technology, changing technology. Overall, my interest is to improve their social, economic, and mental well-being.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Ms. Connolly, same question, please.
I agree that we need to support additional programs for our elderly. I think sometimes we are getting to that point of getting old, and we have to realize that 60, 65 is not old. So I think in terms of providing some sort of programs for them, even for retired teachers to still be able to go back into the school to do tutoring, after school tutoring, or even the gentlemen to do like security work. I think they need to continue to work. They're not able to live off of their salary or off a pension, so they really need to be able to make more money. So as a result of that, I think we really need to provide work for them after retirement in areas like that. In terms of programs for our elderly, I think we need to, like Mr. Lindsay said, provide them with IT education so that they can actually be able to learn to do WhatsApp, Facebook, and stuff, because that's something that that's an entertainment tool for them as well, you know, to keep them busy. I would like the elderly to go into the schools and learn and teach our children our culture and all that the craft and thatch and all of those things, because, you know, they feel like they're out there and they don't feel like they're providing any sort of service anymore. And I think that's something that we have to really insist that we provide additional programs and other avenues for them to keep them entertained and to keep them occupied. And at the same time, they need to be given like a stipend or something for the work that they would be doing.
Thank you.
3 rounds of questions complete. So after this break, we'll go into the final round of questions. So please stay tuned.
March in Cayman is hot, but at Foster's, it's frozen.
Frozen Food Month is back, and we're giving away 4 $250 Foster's cards. To enter, just purchase any 3 products from the frozen department from now until March 27th. It's that easy.
You could grab a frozen pizza for dinner, frozen berries for a morning smoothie, and frozen plant-based sausages for something different.
Exactly. Just don't forget to enter online at fosters.ky/frozen food month. Foster's, better because we care.
Most people want the same basic things in life. They want to be safe, healthy, happy. They want a good job. In a word, people want prosperity. So how can we create more prosperity for Caymanians? Another way to say prosperity is standard of living. There are 3 basic ways to improve the standard of living. First, the government can spend more money on services like healthcare, education, or infrastructure. That would make life better for Caymanians. But it would also cost more money, which means more government fees. So it might bring a better standard of living, but it would also increase the cost of living. The second way to improve living standards would be to reduce the cost of living. A lower cost of living means people have more money to spend on other things. But in a modern economy, for the most part, the cost of living isn't something that the government can directly control. The third way to improve living standards would be to increase salaries. Raising salaries has the same effect as reducing the cost of living, because it gives people more money to spend. If only there was some way we could increase salaries, increase government revenue, and decrease the cost of living all at the same time. There is. It's called economic growth. In the last video, we saw how companies turn revenue into 4 economic outputs, including duties and fees and salaries. So in order to improve government services without increasing anyone's government fees, and at the same time increasing salaries, companies need to make more revenue so they can afford to pay more money in salaries and duties and fees. And that's what economic growth is. Companies making more revenue and turning it into more money in salaries, overheads, government fees, and profits. But wait, what about the cost of living? Is there a way economic growth can reduce the cost of living? Yes. Have you ever wondered why most things cost so much less in the United States? That's because companies there sell a much greater quantity and can therefore afford to make less on each individual sale. Economists call this economies of scale. The fact that a growing economy raises living standards and creates prosperity is one of the few things that all economists agree on. It's what people mean when they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. In the next episode, we'll start looking at how we could help the economy grow. For now, thanks for watching. And remember to share this video with your family and friends so that they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine. So we've already talked about what economic growth means and why it's so important. But how do we achieve economic growth? Well, remember the 3 tiers of the Cayman Islands economy? In a way, each tier is like a separate economy in its own right. They each have different growth drivers, and different obstacles to growth. So let's look at each tier and see how we can help them grow. Let's start with Tier 3. Remember, Tier 3 is made up of all the companies that sell products and services to the residents of the Cayman Islands, like Foster's, Kirk's, Hurley's, Scott's Marine, A.L. Thompson's, Cox Lumber, Champion House, Al Kebab, and so on. So how can we help these companies grow? Let's look at a great example of a Tier 3 company, a hairdressing salon. To increase revenue, the hair salon could spend more money on marketing and win customers that way. More customers means more revenue, right? Right. However, that's not economic growth. Because although more customers would mean more revenue, that's only because another salon's revenue went down. If you could look at the hairdressing sector as a whole, the overall revenue or demand stayed exactly the same. Even if an entrepreneur came along and opened a new salon, that wouldn't be economic growth either, because, again, demand for hairdressing hasn't changed. That doesn't mean having more salons is a bad thing, but it's not economic growth. So the question is really, what would have to happen to increase demand for hairdressing? Well, two things. First, disposable incomes could go up. Disposable income is what people have left over after they've paid for important things like housing and food. When disposable income goes up, people have more money to spend on things like hairdressing. When disposable income goes down, like during a recession, people look for ways to cut back on spending, so they visit hair salons less often. And what could cause disposable income to increase? You guessed it, economic growth. The second way to increase demand would be to increase the population. More people means more customers buying more products and services from Tier 3 businesses like hairdressers. So in that way, population growth actually helps our Tier 3 businesses. Now, not everyone agrees that population growth is a good thing. And that's fine. But because population growth is both a cause and result of economic growth, trying to grow the economy without growing the population is like standing in a bucket and trying to lift yourself up by the handle. It's not gonna get you anywhere. In the next video, we'll look at how Tier 2 companies fit into the economy and how to help them grow. For now, thanks for watching. And remember to share this video with your family and friends so they can learn more about our economic prosperity engine.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for Georgetown South. We're now at the final round of questions, and to kick us off is Nelson Dilbert.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the candidates for coming down and sitting with us. The next topic I'm going to start off with is going to start with you, Ms. Connolly, is going to be the cost of living. The cost of living is ranked as one of the top issues from the respondents in the most recent Chamber Public Survey. What additional strategies would you propose to address this issue beyond those you have already touched on?
I'd like to complete the minimum wage review that was stopped as a result of COVID. The government, we had to stop it as a result of COVID. What we should also consider discussing is a minimum wage versus a living wage. And I think we have to determine which one of those that's more beneficial to our people. And we have to complete the review of government import duty and seek to remove stamp duty on certain items such as medicines, disposable diapers, feminine products, and birth control products. That would bring down the cost of living as well. And we need to require the OFREG to complete its work assessing the fuel providers and ensure that the fuel pricing mechanism is fair. I also touched on health insurance earlier. We also need to explore home insurance and also pension plans that exist alongside those offered by the private sector to try to decrease those rates in terms of bringing the cost of living down for our people.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question, please.
Cost of living is a really hot topic for us in the Cayman Islands. When we experienced the lockdown, we also saw world gas prices fall. Unfortunately, the prices in Cayman Islands did not fall initially. They later fell by 20% at the pump. We were told that since we hold all of the expensive gas, that supply had to finish first, and then the price would go lower. The truth is, Off-Reg has the power to regulate gas prices, both at the pump and what is reflected as a fuel factor on your electricity bill. The fact is, Off-Reg is not doing its job. If elected, I will ensure that Off-Reg is restructured so that we have members of a board who are actually executing their duties in the interests of the public. Now, other than Off-Reg and possible restructuring, some of the other things that we need to look at is solar. We have these large government buildings that have a huge footprint. We have a lot of warehouses that have a huge footprint. There's no reason why solar shouldn't be used on those buildings. I also believe that we should allow solar providers to produce excess solar and also allow them to pass on those credits to low-income communities to remove the burden that those low-income communities may feel as a result of high cost of living. We also need to remove the conflicts of interest between our electric provider and our ministry, because if we don't remove conflicts of interest, what we're going to have is our electric provider, which is the current monopoly, becoming the monopoly for renewable energy.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, staying with you for the next question, focuses on the marine environment. The question is, several local species of fish that we love to eat are on their way to extinction from overfishing. Will you support a ban on shoreline fishing so as to restore this precious aspect of our tourism attraction, food reserve, and new sand production?
So in terms of marine parks, we know that National Conservation Marine Parks regulations was recently gazetted. And so when we look at all the different zones that are now marine park zones, all the expansions, that will, increase our natural capital. I think that will allow our fish to have a chance to grow, in particular, parrotfish and groupers. In relation to the parrotfish, we understand that it's a parrotfish that's actually producing sand. So if we ensure that these new expansions to marine parks are adhered to and maintained, we'll give a chance for the parrotfish population to grow. We also have to make sure that we think about our Caymanian fishermen, because this is what they do for a living. This is how they feed their families. So we have to have ongoing consultation with our Cayman fishermen as well to ensure that although we've expanded the marine parks, although we have increased our natural capital as a result, we also need to ensure that they're getting enough to survive. And this has to be an ongoing conversation. I understand the necessity to increase the natural capital marine-wise, but we also have to have this continuing conversation with our fishermen to ensure that their way of life is not impacted.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, same question, please.
I don't think we should prohibit fishing from the shore. The government, we actually just supported the marine park expansion with no fish areas. That was more than doubled in all three islands. And the dive zones were also significantly expanded. This expansion was the most significant expansion and enhancement to the marine park systems in more than 30 years. I do agree that fishing from online fishing is the livelihood of some of our fishermen, and we really can't take that away from them. But I do agree that we have to be mindful of where they fish and ensure that they do just focus on the areas that are not marine parks. So that's something, it's really more of an enforcement issue in terms of ensuring that they fish from the areas that are required for them without them actually encroaching on our marine parks.
Thank you.
Ms. Conway, we're going to stay with you. We're going to move on to a new topic, pension reform. Nearly $500 million has been withdrawn from private pension funds as a part of the pandemic response. These withdrawals will impact the ability for many persons in our community to have enough funds for retirement. What is your proposed solution to address this future shortfall?
Even before these withdrawals, there were concerns as to whether the current pension regime was truly fit for purpose. It's almost impossible for our people to actually live on what they're getting now in terms of their pensions. They receive $1,000 a month, and they're supposed to pay for health insurance, and then they have their expenses. You know, it's just not practical. So among the Progressives and the Alliance in our manifesto, we are looking at a more affordable option for pension plans that can exist alongside those offered by the private sector, because we can't continue the way we're going with pension funds after these withdrawals now. Our people are just not going to have adequate funds to live, and they're actually living longer lives. So at the end of the day, when they've depleted their pension funds, then they have to revert back to NAU or their families. So it's just not sustainable.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question, please.
So what is the proposed solution to address future shortfall? I think I keep mentioning the same issue of lack of planning. If we had planned properly and planned long term, we would have had additional revenue sources other than financial services and tourism. We look at a place like Trinidad, which has a Heritage and Stabilization Fund, and that is funded by oil reserves. If we look at Cayman, if we can create a sovereign wealth fund where sectors and different industries would agree to contribute to the fund, the money on the fund would be used for emergencies, natural disasters, top-up pensions, top-up healthcare. The ideas that I have for pension are based on several levels. There would be a guaranteed level on the basis that we have an additional revenue source, on the basis that we have a reserve in place. The levels would be: one, a guaranteed level for people who are earning $3,000 a month or less. They would get a livable guaranteed pension amount. The next step would be occupational pension, which would be a percentage of their salary. And in this case, since we have a guaranteed pension in place, the occupational pension payment would be a little less than what it is now. The next level is premium pension, which would allow you, if you're earning a higher salary, to put a premium on your pension. I also think that we need to start investing some of these pension funds in infrastructure here so that we can have a tie to what we invest to our well-being. We can see the benefits immediately from our pension investments.
Thank you.
Question 19, Mr. Lindsay, staying with you, focusing on the cruise industry. Question is, what are your views on the future of the cruise industry in the Cayman Islands?
No mega cruise ships for the Cayman Islands. There were a lot of things that were considered at the time that the CPR group were discussing: infrastructure, employment, transparency, and other issues with the expansion to the cruise berthing facility. We were told that the project was dead in the water, and even though the people won the right to referendum vote, that was not allowed. I think that the right to referendum vote was not allowed because the project is not dead in the water. This is evidenced by the amendment to the port regulations, which include this port anchorage zone in the same area that the CPR group and other people had identified as having protected species. So you've changed an area that was an area for protected species to now a port anchorage zone. That is a signal that while the government is saying that it's dead in the water, that they may have plans to do that cruise berthing facility expansion. There are many flaws, many. We haven't considered the impact on infrastructure. For example, what's going to happen to all the traffic downtown? We haven't considered the ownership of the port. For example, they're saying that the port will remain and run by the Port Authority, but we know the power of cruise ship CEOs and their influence on what happens on that port. And the danger is that that operation of that port could revert to these cruise ship CEOs if we give them that power. I just think it's time for our tour operators to reevaluate their relationship with cruise ships. And it's time for us to decide what we want for our country rather than it being dictated by cruise ship CEOs.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly, same question, please.
I beg to disagree with Mr. Lindsay on the fact that there are still plans for the cruise berthing facility. If you look, I don't know if you've had a look at our manifesto, but there's nothing in this manifesto that states that for the next 4 years that the cruise berthing facility is in this book or has any. We are not proposing to go there with the cruise berthing facility. In terms of the cruise industry returning, it's absolutely crucial that we have the cruise industry return to this island. There are hundreds of jobs that we are having to subsidize now because those people, primarily water sports operators and the taxi drivers, the bus operators, tour operators, they are struggling right now. They have families to feed, they have mortgages to pay, and we've given them, government has funded them with, it was 1,000, now it's 15, and if we are re-elected, we will increase that to $2,000. Those people we have to consider are people. Unless we reskill them or retrain them into other areas, they depend on the cruise industry in order to survive. So from that perspective, I think we need the cruise industry to return. Now, in terms of how that's returned, and I agree that we should not be, we should just phase those ships in here. We should we are able now to manage it in terms of having less people arrive, and the ships are phased in, or phased where they come every other day or whatever the case may be, like 2 ships per day, so that we can manage the amount of people that actually arrive on the island, so that everyone will be given a good experience.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm sure you guys are excited to hear. This is their last question for the evening. We're going to stay with you, Ms. Connolly. It's going to be about sustainable growth. What is your definition of sustainable growth, and what ideas, views do you have to achieving it?
Sustainable growth. Is that in terms of development or? Okay. I think in development, we really have to consider the way we are developing. And Minister Hugh has the plan Cayman, which is actually is taking the place of the Cayman the National Development Plan, and if we are reelected, that will go up for public consultation, and after that it will be implemented. And in that plan, it'll have like 5 zones. So the first zone would be the 7 Mile Beach corridor, and that will be explored to see really what the building requirements are there, and then they'll come into Georgetown and throughout the island. So every 5 years, then it will be revisited. So in terms of sustainability, I think that plan is the way forward in terms of ensuring that we don't overdevelop, and if we do develop, it's in the right areas of the island.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, same question.
In terms of definition of sustainability, it is really economic development without depleting your natural resources. To understand what is the value of our natural resources or natural capital, we will have to do natural capital accounting. You see, our normal measure of success is produce capital and human capital, goods and services. We need to assign a value to our environment in order for us to properly allocate a value to our natural capital. Why? Because when you consider what is sustainable development or sustainable growth, you also have to include a value on your environment. Why do you do this? Because when you make a policy decision and you say our mangroves are worth $10 trillion, and if you remove a certain amount of mangroves, then it's going to be a financial figure that you're going to be thinking about before you make a policy decision, rather than just to allow mangroves to be cut down, cleared, cement poured on them without consequences. So I think we have to also update our development plan. Like I say, it's dated 1997. If we update our development plan, then we can discuss how sustainability looks within that long-term 20 to 50-year plan. That development plan must include, in the definition of sustainability, our natural capital, maintaining our marine environment, expansion in terms of parks, and also on land having increased protected areas. We must have biodiversity in this equation for sustainable development and growth. If not, we'll die.
Thank you.
Well, thank the candidates. We've gone through 20 questions. You've answered all the questions. So right now we're going to go to a short commercial break. And when we return, each candidate will deliver some closing remarks. Please stay tuned.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you.
Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for Georgetown South. We reach a stage in this evening where we have closing remarks from each of our candidates. We're going to begin this evening with Mr. Alric Lindsay.
I think we have to do the same thing for elected officials that we do for our students. As you know, students get a report card, and there's math, English, religion, whatever. There are grades for all of those. So when we look at how our elected officials have performed, I want to encourage all of you to do a report card for all of their subjects. For example, the lockdown, we have praised the government for following instructions from UK Public Health and the Chief Medical Officer, and that was great. So I think the government gets an A for the lockdown. Now, when we look at the public education system, we still have issues in that system. We're not concentrating on what is effective on learning. We are still focused on the politics of distraction, bigger buildings, new curriculum. I think that going forward, when we go to the polls, take your report card with you to determine all the areas that the government has actually performed well. So I would give them a fail for public education. I would give them a fail for the environment, for failure to enforce environmental laws. I'll give them a fail for healthcare, because a lot of our seniors went without healthcare during the lockdown, and the gaps that are in the healthcare industry are currently not closed. As an elected representative, I will fight for transparency, the same way I fought for transparency with Smith-Barcadere, where there were no written minutes kept and no valid proof of an establishment of a committee, and where the budget showed $1 million per year for 2020 and 2021, whereas it was marketed to us as a total of $500,000. I will also promote accountability. I will not stand and be silent when a violent assault occurs against one of our own. I will act in the best interest of our country and not in any special interests. I will also remain engaged with my community through the district council regular meetings and ensure that the district council represents a wide cross-section of Georgetown South and not just people that voted for me. I will tackle traffic, the environment, cost of living, and other issues during my first 365 days in office. I would also pledge now, as I've done before, 25% of my salary towards the district council or a charity. So when you go to the polls, I want you to elect me, Alric Lindsay, as the next representative for Georgetown South.
Ms. Barbara Conley.
Thank you, Bill. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Bill, Mike, and Nelson, and your team at the Chamber for hosting these forums. I would also like to thank Eric and April, the media team here tonight. I would also like to thank all of the sponsors and the public for tuning in to this show tonight. To my constituents in Georgetown South, I came to you and asked you to put your trust in me in 2017, and here I am again, privileged to have served as your representative over the past 4 years. Going forward, I will continue to listen to your concerns and action them accordingly. I will establish a constituency council to take representation to the next level. We have achieved a lot but there is a lot more to be done. I'm asking for your vote on April the 14th. Barbara Connolly, vote Barbara Connolly, number 1 on your ballot paper. I thank you for this opportunity, and good night.
Well, thank both candidates. Now I'm going to turn it over to the President of the Chamber, Mike Gibbs, for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Will. On behalf of the Chamber Council and staff, I'd like to thank the Georgetown South candidates, Barbara Connolly and Alric Lindsay, for participating in this evening's forum. I trust that the forum will help voters in that constituency to determine who to vote for when you go to the polls on April the 14th. I would also like to thank Foster's for their major sponsorship of the Chamber's candidate forums, as well as Affinity Recruitment, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART. If you're interested in viewing more of the Growth Matters video series that have been playing during tonight's commercial breaks, they can be viewed at growthmatters.ky. Please join us Wednesday evening as we welcome Perlina McGaw-Lumsden, Elio Solomon, Kenrick Webster, and David White from Georgetown West. Thanks again for tuning in, and please join us tomorrow evening at the same time. Good night.
At Baymarket Cafe, we know life can get in the way of good food, so we're here to offer a hand. Online ordering is back, and this time, it's better than ever. If you overslept and are running out of time, order online and pick it up. Raining? Get it delivered. On your way to go there or do that, order and pick it up. Sun scorching? Meeting? Get it delivered. That way, you can spend more time doing this or that with him, her, they, and them. So whether you need your morning coffee, you're craving a red velvet donut, ramen, a lamb burger, or a falafel pita, order the food you love and skip the line. Pick it up or have it delivered. That's Baymarket Online.